We are welcome to session 4. This is on engaging audiences. So we're going to start with, as Suzanne mentioned, with our icebreaker. Then we're going to go over our learning outcomes for session 4. And then we are going to hear from our guest speakers who we will introduce in a few minutes before when we get to that bit. But we're so grateful to Molly and Karen and Lauren and Brad for joining us tonight. After they kind of share their experiences and wisdom with you, we're going to have a panel question and answer. So you guys can put your questions in the chat and we will ask them of our guests. And then we will then kind of practice our what we've learned throughout this session in the pre-work and in this evening with an example scenario. And then, of course, we'll go over announcements and important dates. So for our icebreaker this evening, this is much more fitting than it was the first time I showed you this image. I'm going to start with a poll, just asking you, let me just let a few more people in, asking you how you feel about the snow. So do you love it snow much, or are you really wishing that it was spring and we were headed that way? And then in the chat, just type something that you did this over the past few snowy days, how you enjoyed it, or hid from it. So go ahead and find that chat function, which is on the bottom, and feel free to share with everybody what you did.
Sledding, I love it. It's so fun to see the dogs, isn't it? How much they love the snow. Dogs and kids are fun. Somebody did their GIS homework. Yay.
As those are coming in, we have a pretty even mix, actually. A few more people love the snow than are not big fans. Personally, I love it so much. And like many of you, my dog was loving the snow. She's got so much fur, and it was really fun to watch her just running around in our garden. Let's see. We've got a lot of people that think this is just a tiny bit of snow compared to other places. Awesome. All right, so with that, we will go over the learning objectives. So the learning objectives for this session and for all the pre-work leading up as well are these. So participants will review and discuss digital presentation and print outreach materials. You'll all understand how to engage stakeholders in restoration projects. You'll be exploring conflict resolution techniques and reviewing and discussing the concept of equity and considering how equity relates to engaging audiences.
So I think it's my turn now to introduce our presenters. And sorry, Josh, did you?
Yeah, I just want to verify because my screen switched up. Francesca, are you recording?
Yes.
Okay, sorry guys, sorry for the interruption. Just wanted to verify.
So I just want to take a quick minute to tell you a teeny bit about each of our presenters, and they'll tell you more about themselves when they talk, but I want to give you a little insight about why we chose them tonight. So there's a million people who've had a lot of great experience. Yes, I see the red line in the middle of the screen too, Chris. I think that might have been someone on our staff scribble scratting on the slide, sorry. So there's a million people have done really great outreach and engagement, and we wanted to just bring you a couple of examples of people that have done some unique things and have overcome sort of some unique challenges. So in no particular order, but a little particular order, Molly LaChapelle is a watershed steward from the Berrywood community, and she has done really a heroic job of engaging her community in a very, very large restoration project that was over a decade in the making, that stopped and started a couple of times, and you know, really has she's really had to dig into what it means to engage her community in a really meaningful way. And she's got lots and lots of other experience engaging kids and other things as well. And her sort of partner in the community and elsewhere is Karen Royer, who is not a watershed steward, but really she should, if we could give anyone an honorary watershed steward doctorate, it would be Karen. But she and her husband, Bob, are like geniuses in terms of promotion and getting to engage people. And you might recognize Karen from the Woods Memorial stormwater video. And you might remember Molly from the WSA video and then also the Berrywood video if you watched it. So they're gonna give a little bit. And then Brad Knopf is the person I've known the longest here. I've known Brad for so many years. He was a watershed steward in class 1, what has been the steward of the year, and he's got over a decade's experience engaging his community in many different ways. And he's got a cohort here in the class, Stacy. And so he'll be talking all about Cape St. Clair, which is a really big community. So to try to engage that community is pretty tough. And then last, my esteemed colleague, Lauren Jenkins, who is an admirer of middle schoolers. And she's the person on the Arlington Echo staff that I feel her role is to throw out any rule or guidebook when it comes to engaging kids and write her own. And her own is one that is deeply informed by the kids themselves. And so I'm really excited for what she has to share. So with that said, I will let our first presenter go, and I forget who was going first. So Francesca will tell us.
Yep, so we have Karen and Molly are going first.
And oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to say that we're gonna do all 3 of the presentations and then we're gonna have Q&A. But you can feel free to type questions in the chat anytime.
Hello?
Yeah, we hear you, Molly.
Okay, I guess I'll start. This is really a very important topic when you're working with people. And what the introduction or background information that you gave with your cohort at the Arlington Echo, working with middle schoolers and throwing out the book and letting the kids have input is exactly what I was going to say. In dealing with our community has 325 homes. We have 2 recreation areas, 2 marinas, and basically our project was born because we had a Cattell Creek is the longest feeding creek of the Magothy River. It goes from the middle school through our community. And it was degraded. Our parking lot was falling in, our boat ramp was falling in, our marina was old and needed replacement. And so we had to do something. And I took the watershed stewards class and got really motivated and met wonderful people and made wonderful contacts. And that set us on our course. I would say when you start dealing with a community, be thankful for everyone as a potential ally. Assume goodwill. Keep an open mind and be curious, not judgmental. And the picture you see of the round table is in my dining room. And that was probably 6 months into our program, our project. Prior to that, because in that picture, there are funders shown there. But the rest of the people are community members. And the project started because we identified a problem. We put it out to the total community. And I invited the people in the community who live adjacent, their backyards and across the street from them are directly involved. So they would be the ones that would be dealing with whatever trucks, construction, whatever would be part of their life. So involving everybody from the very, very beginning is very important. I don't know how much more time I have, so I don't want to take Karen's time. What we did in terms of engaging the communities, besides these initial meetings of having these neighbors at my table saying, this is what we see as the problem. What are your suggestions? How do you think we should fix it? And then we did a community-wide event, Rock the Dock, where we brought community, we had a party at the problem site so that people could actually see the issue for themselves. And we, Bob is, and another neighbor who is big on, he's a producer of videos, made a YouTube video that we could put out to all the community and the neighbor and the community around us about this issue and how important it was that we fix it. We created an information sheet with the problem and the solutions that this committee of roundtables had come up with, along with our work with DNR and watershed stewards to produce this. And that just led to lots of meetings and lots of input. But if you really want to, it's my feeling with my years of experience, is that if you really want people to buy in, they have to be the ones to buy in. They have to see the problem. They have to have an opportunity to make suggestions, to debate their suggestions in an open forum, and then move forward, because they're going to be your salespeople for the whole project, for whoever you have to contact. Amen.
So I'm Karen Royer, and I'm a member of Woods Church. And this is how we engaged the church. It's a big congregation in Severna Park, and we have about a 4-acre campus that had, except for the trees that were there from the early 1900s when the land was original, everything that had been planted, especially in the mid-90s, was non-native. So we had a gardening group at the church, and we decided we're going to try to be better stewards of our property. So we called in a higher authority. And since we're a church, you might think we called on God, but we actually called on the Baywise people. And the Baywise team came and visited our church and walked around and made a list of things that they would like to see if we were going to make improvements to our property. And one of them was, please plant native plants. So we made that as our authority that we appealed to when we wanted to bring people on board. So we said, we have these recommendations. We would like to follow them to be, everyone in the church community certainly wants the Bay to be healthy. So no one could really say no to that higher authority of the Baywise recommendations. So that's where we started. And then we informed everyone. The picture that you see there of me talking, it was in the fellowship hall. as many pictures and as much information as you can get out, and pictures are worth 1,000 words. We were lucky that Allison Milligan, who is also a watershed steward, has a software program where she could project what a New Jersey tea or what a low-growth sumac would look like in these particular gardens. So the people who were invested in the gardens the way they were with non-native plants from who knows where, Asia and everywhere else, wouldn't be offended that we're going to come in and rip their things out. We just said, no, we're going to plant alongside it and make it one beautiful display in the gardens and the natural areas around our parking lot and building. And this is what it'll look like in the spring and in the fall. So you can really bring people on board. You can have announcements if you have a community newsletter. Our church has a newsletter. We have bulletins, so we could put opportunities, everything that, like Molly said, make it all positive. Assume people are going to be on board and say, it's a wonderful opportunity and this will be great. Getting a grant was huge because it wasn't like we were taking money that people had given to the church for mission or good works in the world. We got a small grant, $1,000 from Unity Gardens. So we could say, look, they've given us this money and we have to use it to plant native plants. So this is, a great thing. Birds and butterflies are things that people do. You can see in the picture where I'm talking, there's a finch on something. Everyone loves birds and butterflies and no one wants them to starve. So that's another good thing to bring people on board, whether it's the knitting group, the old ladies who play bridge at the church, the scout team, the scout troop, we had lots of the preschool at Woods. They wanted to know what was going on. So we gave out a lot of information. And then the next thing was invite a lot of participation. So we wanted to serve snacks when we had planting days. So not everyone can dig a hole, but you can ask them, could you come and hand out, cups of water or Fritos or cook hot dogs or whatever it is. And then invite periphery groups. So everyone you see in this picture where it was the reforesting day in October 2019, not all of those people go to Woods Church. There's the Broadneck High School Honor Society because someone at the church is a teacher and they invited those kids. There's kids from the scout troop that meets at Woods. There were adult groups. The Baywise people came back and helped us. They were teaching all the volunteers how to plant plants. So you do want things done right. So you want some, you can't just have a mob of people show up to do things. You do want it done well. So you have to have some structure and pre-planning. And then that kind of participation builds investment. And when people are invested, then they're happy to see you do more. So they see things bloom the next spring, and then we applied for another grant and we could start the process all over. The Sunday school wanted to go on a tour. So here I am in the bottom picture talking to the Sunday school kids, but really I'm talking to their parents, even though it looks like one of them is looking at her phone. But you really want as much information in people's hands so they can see, oh, this is a good plant. It's a host for such and such caterpillar. The roots are much deeper than turf grass. So yes, we lost some of the lawn, but we have a much better, stormwater mitigation. So all that is good when people know what they're doing and why. And then the last thing I thought was, guilt actually works too. You can sort of say, well, gee, you certainly want to provide habitat for the creatures that were here before we paved the whole parking lot and put in sidewalks and big buildings and all that. So there is the men who were kind of committed to the original gardens with Nandina and things that didn't belong there. I could kind of guilt them into finally agreeing with me. And even the guy who objected the most, just because it was fun to object, he now is a proponent. So it's you, like Molly said, you bring the whole community along with you rather than strike out on your own and tell people you're going to solve this great problem when they aren't part of the solution. So that's what we did at Woods.
Thank you so much, Karen and Molly. That was really great to hear about. Now we're going to hear from Brad on his experience in his community.
Well, it's such a nice thing to have. It's such a blessing to have a large community with a lot of different kinds of people, but it's an audience. It's a built-in audience, and it's fairly convenient to reach out to them through the community newsletter and little signs along the road. But I wanted to touch on a couple things quickly that are that go back a few years. The Marylanders Grow Oysters, which started out as a little MRA. Oh, let's go Project Clean Stream. There's a good idea. This was since 2013, and it's very easy to do because Alliance for the Chesapeake provides most of the tools. All you got to do is get the people there, and it's an opportunity for people to feel good about contributing to something wholesome and helping their community. So the standard ways of reaching out through our Facebook page and email list that you build over the years, and the community newsletter, all those things. And it grew so quickly since 2013, even in the rain, as you can see. And people were just so happy to carry the most awful stuff out of the woods and pile it up to be carried away, and to just gloat over the piles of junk. Lots of students, of course, and it's a great thing to have a couple of schools nearby where they all need their service hours. That's very handy as well. That's a great tool to have. So that's ongoing. We couldn't do it last year, but hopefully we can keep doing that. The next one is the Oyster Nursery, and it's again an opportunity for people to feel good. They gain a sense of well-being. They're contributing to helping the river, helping the creatures, helping the environment, and having a good time while they're at it. The kids are just crazy about this stuff. They love to get dirty, and that's why we had that nursery in the first place, was just for an outreach thing for people to come see. So here again, you get over 100 people involved, and it's easy for them too. It's just a little bit of coordinating, a little bit of outreach, and they feel very good about it. So these things go back, both of those go back to 2013, kind of jumping off points from Watershed. Once I went through that, it was see what we can get into, what else can we get into? But the main one these days is the Cape Conservation Corps, because we found that we needed to have a 501c3, but it started off as caring for what we know as Lake Claire. It was originally called Friends of Lake Claire, but once we got the 501c3 and it kept growing, and we started to establish some annual events, it really got well entrenched, well ingrained into the community. And the beautiful thing about it is, I think of people like Suzanne and Jennifer Vaccaro, and now Stacy and Marita. I have all these heroes that are just, they're warriors is what they are, and they're so inspirational and just loaded with knowledge, plant wizards and every other type of magic. It's just wonderful. But so here we have all these annual events. Couldn't do the Harvest Bash this past year, but we're basically giving everything away, $25, and they get all they could drink, all they could eat, live music, and it's a big party, and everybody's socializing and feeling good about it. It's for a good cause. It was a fundraiser. And then we have the speaker series, which are totally free, the BYOB, and we bring some snacks. We all provide the snacks for that. And some great people like Sam Droege was incredible, and Nancy Lawson and Chris Pax. It's just a wonderful thing to see 70, 80 people sitting around, like-minded people, just like at a Watershed class, like-minded people in the same room, going in the same direction. The Fall Native Plant Fest is kind of a giveaway too. We buy all the natives from the Cavanaugh and the environmental concerns and things, and people have learned, it didn't take them long, that they're getting them just about wholesale. So this past year, we sold out in less than 2 hours. And there were some people that were a little grumbly about it because they missed it, but it'll be bigger and better next year. It's almost gotten out of hand. It's a wonderful thing. And yeah, isn't it? So we're gonna bulk up our budget for next year, right, Stace? And Habitat Hero is something that Stacy championed, and it reminds me so much of a thing that I did earlier with Watersheds. It was like a neighborhood, somebody that's doing all the right things, and we celebrate them. Stacy writes about them in her blog for the Caper, and they have a yard sign for them, and something to feel good about. And the last thing is the Weed Warriors, and Stacy is the warrior on this one. This is every Wednesday night through the season, and they're out there picking weeds pulling out the bush killer, because we discovered, sadly, an invasive that had never been seen in Maryland before, and it moves so fast and tears down trees so quickly that we had to act, and action is taking place. But here again, people feel good about it. You know, they're contributing. They might get a glass of wine, they might get some snacks, but they feel good about it. So that's my story.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Brad. So I see there's some questions coming in the chat. I'm making a note of those, so afterwards we'll get to ask. So next we're going to hear from Lauren Jenkins, who's going to talk about her work with Chesapeake Connections.
Thanks. And Josh, if you're driving this, I'm going to be quick. So you got to be on it. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Lauren Jenkins. I'm part of the Chesapeake Connections team with the Office of Environmental Literacy and Outdoor Education with Anne Arundel County Public Schools. Our team focuses on outdoor environmental engagement with 6th grade students within AACPS. So I see roughly 7,000 students each year and work to bring meaningful outdoor experiences to all those students. Now, although I have only been doing this since 2007, I guess that's nothing to cough at, but I'm in no way an expert in education. I may focus on 6th grade, but I do have experience working with K all the way through 12 and adult audiences. So each age level has its own unique nuances. I'm going to be sharing what has been successful in our 6th grade Chesapeake Connections program, key lessons I've learned along the way, and a few tips and tricks that maybe they'll work for you. Okay. So success, hands-on is best. Kids learn by doing. Anything to get a concept to stick is worth it, whether that's building a model, drawing a picture, or getting to hold a little baby lamb. If they're doing it, they're more likely to make connections and to remember it. Messy is always good. Talk about hands-on, right? Opinions are valid. I found kids want to be heard. Giving them a chance to voice their opinions, tell a story, or share something is important for them. And you want to make room for it. Explain why. Ever been told that's just the way it is, or told to do something because I said so? Yeah, nobody likes that. So kids tend to get bossed around, and it's important to remember that kids are people too. They deserve explanations as to why things are done a certain way. And this could be anything from scientific procedures to safety measures or even manners or empathy. So embrace those teachable moments too. Connect to life. Kids want to know why we're learning the things we teach. So how will this impact their life? If you make it relevant to them, they'll want to learn. Wow factor. So you want to point out interesting things or unique things. If you thought it was cool, they might think so too. And if they know you have cool stuff to tell them, they will want to learn more and they'll lean in. Be you. Kids can totally spot a faker. They know if you're pretending to be something you're not, so just be you. Some key lessons I've learned along the way: expect some disappointment. That's me over there being a creeper. You can't win over everyone. Some kids will think you're lame. Some kids will roll their eyes at your terrible, corny jokes. Some kids don't even like being outside or learning about science, but keep doing you. And you might convert a few, but don't be disappointed if you don't have 100% enthusiasm. It's not personal. Attitude is everything. Enthusiasm is contagious. Embrace the sidetrack. This one's hard, but let spontaneous questions or discoveries alter your lesson course. The main goal is to get kids interested and engaged. And the best way to do that is to embrace their inquiries. Once that little butterfly flies away, they'll be ready to jump back into the lesson. Be flexible. Plans are great, but you need to be willing to make changes in the middle to make the best experience. Confidence. It's okay if you don't know all the answers. Speak like you do and tell the truth if you don't know. Memories of a lifetime. So they may not remember the pH results of the water test that you're doing or what pH stands for, but they will remember being outside and doing real science and learning in the real world. So here's some tips and tricks. Prepare. So you want to scout out locations, make a plan ahead of time, have an emergency plan. Once you have everything figured out, you can focus on your students in the moment. Project your voice. This is really important. Students of any age will not gain anything from your lesson if they can't hear you. No assumptions. So never assume your students can't do something or they won't like something or even really that they will. It's up to them. Their first experience. This happens to me on a daily basis. You may walk by a certain mushroom 20 times today or have seen thousands of this one particular bug, but for them, it's their first time, and your excitement should reflect or even exceed theirs. Embrace the unique. Kids, they like weird things and they talk about crazy stuff that you probably won't understand. Embrace it. Ask them about it. Be open to something new. Allow struggle. Don't be afraid of the dreaded silence after you ask a question or kids who say they can't do it. Silence is what allows thinking and processing time, and pushing students to try forces them to grow. Accept help. Kids, all they want to do is help, so let them. You can fix it later. Thank you. I hope my successes, key lessons, and tips and tricks come in handy for you when you're trying to engage students. If you need to contact me, here's my info.
Thank you so much, Lauren. So we've had some really great questions come in, so let's get started with that. So one of them is, what permissions do you need to get in advance, if any, from parents or guardians when working with kids? Does anybody, and how does that process work?
Well, at least within the school system, we have media releases that their parents have to sign, but that's only for purposes of posting things on social media or on a website. But you'll need some sort of written consent that you can use their child's photo.
So I should just jump in and say that for Watershed Stewards Academy, we have those for you, and we'll be going over those during the project management session.
Yeah, Unity Gardens requires the same thing. If there's a photo of anyone, you have to have a photo release signed. So just have it on your sign-in sheet. My sign-in sheet said, sign in, and it's a photo release.
We
Great,
used
thank
the
you.
Same type of sign-in sheet when we had our Rock the Dock and other events at the marina area, so that we could use pictures.
Excellent. So we had another question, very relevant to these times. So the social engagements sound really fun, but seem unattainable with COVID. Have you found any way to work around that yet? So we can start with Brad, because you mentioned you had some successful events.
We did, and like Stacy said in the chat, the area that we conducted it is quite large. It's what we call the Serene Ravine, a place we've been working on for a few years to replace all the invasives. Plenty of room there, and we staged it so that people could be in their little personal groups or isolated, but plenty of room for everybody. And you know, we said that up front. It worked out pretty well. Alliance wanted to have the Project Clean Stream and limit it to 25 people. I just couldn't see any way to do it, honestly. Even though you could wander off on your own in the woods, when you gather together in a parking lot to stage an event, that's a tough one to overcome.
Molly, Karen, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, we had at the church, we put out the plants in the spots and said, everyone, you know, keep 6 feet apart, or actually it was more like 16 feet apart. And then we had a Unity Gardens grant in Berrywood to plant between the pool and the tennis court on a steep slope. So Nancy Getches and I went down, and the same thing. We put where it should be, directions how to plant a shrub under it, and leaf grow, and said, you can go down as a family, and it was like oversold by the time in 2 days, everything was planted. The families were so happy to get out and work together, and they could easily keep 6 feet apart, but all the instructions came in on the Nextdoor Berrywood page. And we said, take pictures and put them up here. And, you know, it was like a fun thing.
Right.
I should have mentioned that at the plant sale, we staged it physically with the tables being spaced apart and little signs on the walkways to keep 6 feet apart. And we limited the number of people that were allowed into the purchase area in advance. And people were very patient and very understanding, and they sure didn't stay away.
Great. Would anyone like to add any virtual engagement they found successful this past year?
Well, the communication was virtual. It was all through Nextdoor Berrywood and the Berrywood website, or the church, you know, the church messenger, I think it's called, that goes out every week. So people do need to know what's happening and what the procedure is. And it's so easy to do it virtually.
And Karen, didn't you have like time slot signups?
We did.
So it's not like everybody came at once. Like, she not only separated people physically, she separated them in time.
Right. And people could claim a time, like 1 o'clock, 1:30, all afternoon. Molly's daughter-in-law wrote, "We're all done. If there's any more plants, let me know." I was like, thank you, Iris. People really liked it. Yeah.
Karen, did you host a Zoom talk too?
Allison Milligan was our host, and we just put it up on Berrywood, and she was great. She actually had the same kind of pictures, like here's, you know, the Lower Magathy Beach Road, and it's all Bradford pear. Ooh. And this is what it could look like if people had planted trees that were native, and it was so much prettier. So it was a real boost to get people to think outside the whatever a big box store is selling for cheap.
Allison's been very active in that way with individuals in the community also, and helping them to plan for their own property in terms of native plants and water issues. So it's a combined effort we have going here. It's wonderful. We now have Karen and Bob for sure, but our new president of the community is also taking water stewards classes, and so have other people in the community. So it's a growing mushroom, you know. It's taking off, and we'll just build on it.
Great. Now, I'm not sure who of you will have the best experience with this, but there's a question about engaging your community when there isn't an established HOA or neighborhood association. So can anybody offer some advice for how to effectively engage when there aren't kind of those systems in place with email lists and Facebook pages and things?
I think Jim Crafton might have been in that position last year. He, I think, did knocked on doors and passed out flyers up and down whatever that street is and then they had a small, like a boat launch area, and at the designated time, that was the planting time. This was before COVID, but people showed up, and he also used Baywise and watershed stewards to help, so that at least there were people there who knew what to do.
I think even though you have an HOA or a community association, one of the key factors was to contact each family individually. And I did that with that brochure that was shown, that was created by our core committee. Because even people ignore emails, and they ignore what comes on their community letter. And so if you knock on their door and hand them the paper and explain why this is important and that you're interested in their opinion on it and how they would view it, I think that's really key. You can't just do it online. That was my experience. because people don't all read that, and it doesn't deal with them. They don't have to respond to it. So it doesn't have that connection. But
And
if
I
you-
think a key thing was Molly went to the naysayers first. So
Yes, I did.
before some kind of groundswell of, naysaying, whispering goes around, Molly went to the people who had objected to the first round of this creek restoration in Berrywood, went to them and said, what were your objections? What do you think we should do to fix
Right.
it? And had those people come to the first roundtable, that was impressive to see all the people who had been really with their heels in the ground now being on board. That swayed the whole community.
That was my first, that was why my first point being that think of everyone as a potential ally. Just because they didn't like it before doesn't mean they're not gonna like it this time. You have to maintain a positive attitude.
That's
So I
great.
would just say that Molly could talk for about 6 hours about Berrywood and engaging, when there's conflict. So anyone who's got a big community, you'll be able to contact her directly with a big project if you want to get her words of wisdom. Sorry, Francesca.
No, that's okay. I was going to actually ask for you guys to expand on that. So you mentioned a really great way to avoid conflict is to speak to the naysayers first, as you said. Does anybody have any other quick tips on how to prevent conflict?
Once
I would
again,
say-
from Berrywood, I would say be willing to modify your plans.
Right.
Because there was one family that was close to the road that leads down to Marina One, and they said they didn't want this stuff against their property, and we said, fine. Although Keith Underwood and whatnot said, well, that's really what we want, but Molly's like, look, we can back off on that.
So I don't think that you can prevent conflict per se. I think you need to expect conflict, but address it on the front end, as Molly was saying.
Yes, very true. And yeah, take those measures to try to, prevent as much as you can, keep people informed,
Yeah.
but definitely resolve it as well.
Just don't get your mind set on this is what we're gonna do and you're gonna love it.
Yeah.
They're all gonna have ideas.
So we have another question for Molly and Brad. So how, if at all, did you get your HOA or community funds directed towards supporting your outreach events?
Well, back to the beginning, it really is getting all the key players knowledgeable about what the plan could be. And then we had several community meetings and explained what the commitment of the community would be, what the grant opportunities were, and what our buy-in would be, so that when we took a vote, it wasn't an issue. They really wanted to do it and supported it. But it's the before work. What happened previously was that a very good group of neighbors who were very all good intentions of doing a restoration project designed and had a presentation presented, a design to present, but they never told anybody what they were doing or why they were doing it or how they were doing it. So when they presented it to the same community, basically, people were up in arms that you can't do that. We don't want that. And so it failed. And so it took a while for those hurt feelings to dissipate and start again. And that's where Watershed Stewards was critical in a very key point, linchpin in bringing this all together. So it's very important how you lay the groundwork.
Great, thank you.
We have a unique situation with our HOA. We're actually kind of blessed by them. Since we have to operate on basically community property so much of the time, we have one of their members, one of their board members come to our meetings So we're intertwined quite a bit, which leads us to be approved virtually anything we want to do.
Well, and that, I would say that exists now, but at the time it didn't. So that's why I'm so emphatic about getting the neighborhood behind you.
I just want to add to, as far as funding, Cape Conservation Corps, as Brad mentioned, we have our fundraiser, the Harvest Bash, and we have other ways of fundraising, including membership dues and things. And so we raise a lot of the money ourselves and pay for plantings and different things that we want to do in the community. And we've also been recipients of the Unity Garden grant. So we don't really ask the board for money per se, but just their support. So, and that's been key, like just using our own funds. And
How many, I have a question. How many residents do you have in Cape St. Clair?
There's, I think it's what, 2,300 homes,
Yep.
about 8,000 residents.
Right.
Yeah. That's
It's
large.
pretty large, 26 miles of road.
We're 325 houses. So you have
Great.
different opportunities, when you have a different bigger base.
All right, thank you so much. So I think I got all the questions. What we're going to do now is switch to some breakout rooms, and we're going to go over a quick scenario, take a few minutes to practice that, and we'll kind of have an example that we'll go through in your group. So we'll be joined by our guest speakers, and they'll help us kind of work through these things. So you'll be
Francesca, before we do that, can I just ask a question, given all the expertise here? I'm in a condo association, which is only 93 residences and maybe 150 people. But I had approached a board member about doing a project here, and they were reluctant to get into it. They kept wanting me to coordinate with the landscape committee, which is they're basically interested in just planting flowers. They don't want to hear about anything else. And these were only the flowers that they planted in Maine or Pennsylvania or someplace else. So they're not really holistically thinking about the community. And my concern about contacting all the residents, I could do that because I have all their emails, but is there any recommended way to get the backing of the community before trying to do anything? If you have a resistant board who just wants to kind of be nice neighbors and a resistant landscape committee, any suggestions besides just going someplace else, which I may do?
Get on the board.
I was for 7 years, but now I too much headache, so I'm off it now.
Any friends on the board?
Well, I approached somebody I thought was a friend, but he said basically the board was pretty much resistant to doing anything like that, unless I did it with the landscape committee, and they're so backward thinking I can't even begin to approach it. Do you think there would be a problem to send something to the entire community, to all owners? Is that risky?
I mean, you're not asking me, Lynn, because we have these others here, but I would say that that sounds like exactly what they don't want us to do. Because if you have an established like our community has an established landscaping committee of 2, they were the ones that initiated some of our work. We did a garden group and some other improvements around the neighborhood. And they did it under the auspices of we're the landscape committee. And even they got pushback from neighbors about, why did you do this? So, I mean, I'm not an expert, but I can't imagine that trying to overstep an established landscape committee would ever really work, right? I don't know. Maybe someone else has an opinion on that.
Okay.
So I think I'll just jump in to say that we have this little scenario we were going to do with everyone, which I think we could offer after at the 7 o'clock hour, but it almost is exactly like your question, Lynn. So I think I'll try to answer it. And then, those that want to engage in more conflict resolution discussion can do that maybe at the 7 o'clock hour. But When you have a vocal opposition, and particularly a vocal opposition that has sort of a mandate or a role, any attempt to circumvent that group of people is going to result in failure anyway. Maybe not failure in the actual project, but if those people that are naysayers don't see themselves in your project, there will sort of always be trouble. And the one thing that when we get to the behavior change session, we'll talk about this, but when you have someone that really, really disagrees with you, there's sort of two things that you can do. The first thing is to really listen and try to understand where they're coming from, because until you understand where they're coming from, you can basically do nothing. And then the second thing is, if you recognize that they're just never going to change their opinion, you don't then try to change their opinion. And I'll tell you a little quick story I had in my community. We live in a very windy spot. Right now, I think there's 40-mile-an-hour winds. And I had thought we should have wind turbines. Everybody down here complains about how much money they spend on electric. And I had this whole proposal to get wind turbines, and we could pay we would have free electric within 3 years just by paying toward the wind turbine what we would pay toward our electric. And I thought, this is a no-brainer, we're gonna do it. And I did not, and there was a naysayer in the community, and I did not get him on board, and the whole thing crashed. I just had to abandon that effort because it was just they were never gonna change their mind. And so it's really hard when you do have people that don't agree with you. And I would just say two final things. One is, slowly but surely, through other efforts, you can change hearts and minds, but pick a different thing to focus on rather than sort of going like butting up against sort of the authority, because you want them to be your friends. And I'll pause, and I know there's many other people that have this kind of experience. So feel free to pipe up if you have something to share with Lynn during our last couple minutes, because I think we won't do our breakouts, right, Francesca? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so feel free to pipe up if you have some other thoughts.
I thought the part about letting them speak and hearing them, letting them tell how they feel that you just said was the key. Even if it never gets resolved, I think that's magical in getting them at least to the table. I mean, Stacy could probably tell you more about the lady next door to the Serene Ravine, and it got out of hand. But they went to her, got her feelings, talked to her, let her speak, and came to a resolution. At least no standoff. Came to what would you call it? It wasn't conflict anymore. It was not quite a resolution, but
It was a compromise.
a compromise. Yeah.
She was upset about like too much overgrownness coming near her fence, and she was worried about snakes and other wildlife. And so we agreed the community board would mow a strip every couple weeks to keep it a little more under control right up against her fence. So yeah, we were able to deal with it. She's still a little nutty, but it worked
And you
out.
mentioned something in yours as well, Karen, in your presentation about
Yeah,
the plant.
I was going to chime in and say, if that landscape committee really has, what they've done all the time is plant geraniums here and New Guinea impatiens here, and that's how they always want it to be, you could start by saying, that is really pretty, and maybe get Allison Milligan with her magic software to do the same kind of thing. Yes, that looks great. And did you know that these plants that look very similar and have similar flowers, but they also are the host plants for fritillary butterflies and, common buckeyes, and here's the pictures of them. And we could actually have the same beauty, but a function for and so if they don't feel threatened by the lack of a beautiful garden, which they've probably been praised for, it's a swap. They're not swapping out something they love for nothing or something they don't know. They can see what it's going to be, and that value of the host plant, there's a laminated butterfly guide that's been great for people who don't want bugs or they don't want a certain plant. I say, but yes, but look, this certain caterpillar then becomes this beautiful butterfly. And then people say, oh, well, I would really like to see that butterfly. And our associate pastor became a butterfly photographer. So on her treks in and out, going back and forth to hospitals and everything she does as associate pastor, she would take her phone and take pictures of butterflies. So I could post it in the bulletin or the church newsletter and say, Pastor Nancy Lincoln Reynolds took these pictures of butterflies on our plants. So if you have one place that you have a positive outcome, and then send that around to the landscape committee, that might be the baby steps. But you want to do a project with your class, so that you might have to find a different project, but maybe it could be near where you'd like your real project to be, and then people would come on board that way.
Very
Like you said, I
helpful.
think it goes back to having the conversation and not having expectations that they're going to agree with you, but that just to open the door to conversation and be able to introduce your ideas that you mentioned, Karen, and that Cape St. Clair does, but it's starting the conversation. You know, the start isn't sending out something to everybody in the community. The start is getting that small group. And for you, it would be those ladies, you know, having a conversation, not pushing your idea down their throat, just having a conversation.
Really, really helpful. Suzanne putting this in the chat, but I love it. It's not about it's about the relationship, not the project. So having those conversations and starting those relationships with their community members. So we're going to move on, but we will have that additional 30 minutes starting at 7. So one of those topics will be conflict resolution and engaging audiences. So if you would like to stay on, you can do so then. Suzanne, could you explain about this watershed networking?
Yeah, so before I do that, I just wanted to give a thank you so much to Karen and Molly and Brad and Lauren for being here. Thank you so much for sharing. And if it's not already, we'll put their email addresses in the presentation so you can always contact them if you have other questions. Last week I was supposed to have introduced an assignment and I did not. So shame on me, but I'm introducing it now. It's not due until June 1st. It's one of the assignments in your syllabus and on the assignments tab. It's the watershed networking assignment and it's due on June 1st. Basically, the intention of this assignment is for you to introduce yourself as a watershed steward to your local watershed group and learn how you can help each other. So some of you know who your local watershed groups are and you're already well connected. If you're not already connected to your local watershed group, or you don't know who they are or don't know who to contact, there's some directions in the assignment description that will tell you how to do that. We've got a page on our website that will help you contact some of the watershed groups. And if you have no idea who you should contact, send me an email and I'll get you connected. At our conference, there'll be an opportunity to see what all the watershed groups are doing and actually to network within other people in your local area. So you can start the assignment even at our conference, but the assignment just is generally to familiarize yourself with the group and then to either attend an event or interview someone from the group. And in that way, we hope you can begin to build a relationship with your local watershed group. Any questions, you can feel free to ask me by email or give me a call. So that's the networking assignment. And again, the blank page will be in your Google Drive, I think probably tomorrow.
Great, thank you, Suzanne.
Right, should I move on to this one or are you gonna do it?
Sure, yeah, you can go for it.
Yeah, so just a couple reminders about due dates. Today, your GIS assignment was due, and you would just turn that in by saving it in your Google Drive folder. And if you, lots of people have had questions for Josh, so keep those coming. And he'll get some feedback to you guys. And then this week during your Steward Learning Pod, we'll be sharing our experiences of using the neighborhood source assessment and any other questions you have about the neighborhood source assessment. So we'll just have a discussion about that in our pods this week. And then next discussion will be around the social assessment that you all are doing as part of your capstone proposal. So that's next week. And then the following week, February 16th, 2 things are due: capstone proposal part 1 and the community presentations. And then you'll be doing the community presentations in your learning pod the 16th and the 23rd. So I will also say that several of you asked for examples of capstone proposal part 1 and examples of community presentations. So we have posted those on the Steward website under announcements. So you can just go to the announcements part of the homepage on the Class 13 page, and you'll see examples of presentations and capstone part 1 that people have done in the past. But just make it your own. There really is no wrong answer. So we'll look forward to getting your materials around February 16th. And what's next? Session assessment. So we actually forgot to, we didn't forget. I think we sort of forgot to do an assessment for tonight. So tomorrow you'll see the assessment on the page for tonight's session. Next week is funding your project. So all of the pre-session coursework is posted in the Class 13 website under session 5. So funding your project, there's some websites, there's some presentations, videos, other things to take a look at. I already talked about Steward Learning Pods and the proposal, and that there's examples on the announcement page. And then last is that the annual conference. Most of you have been signing up, but this conference is also open to the public. So you can feel free to invite your friends, your family members, anyone that you think might benefit from a little bit more learning about their local watershed and watershed actions. And there's an early bird code that is in effect until February 7th. So you guys are students, so you get to come for $10, but other people, if they use the early bird code, could come for $40. And that's March 5th and 6th.
Great, thank you so much. So for our optional discussions tonight, we have 3 choices. So they are on the NSA and community presentations, on equity and kind of exploring that a bit further, and then on engaging communities and conflict resolution. So you can choose the room. If you don't have that ability on your Zoom, then you can type it in the chat and I'll put you there. If you are looking to talk about equity a bit more, then stay in the main room and that will be with me. So if you're interested in conflict resolution or engaging audiences, join that one, or NSA and community presentations. And if you're with equity, then give me a minute so I can shuffle people around a little bit and then we'll get started.
And for our presenters, you can either feel free to join a breakout, or you can go on with your evening. And please know that we're so grateful that you joined us tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into my room. Presenters, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Night, everybody.
All right, just give me